The quarterback position has been turned upside down in 2024 so far. If you spend an early round pick on Patrick Mahomes, CJ Stroud, Anthony Richardson, it's not working out so far because those three guys are outside the top 12 quarterbacks. Who would have seen that coming? So right now, the quarterback position, we've got to find the best guy to help lead our team to fantasy victory. And this video right here is going to do that for week 4. Yo, what's going on, Headliner Nation? Hopefully your quarterback position is going well and you didn't spend an early round pick on some of the guys that I just talked about. But if you did and you're looking for someone to fill in this week, I've got several options that we can take a crack at. And there's absolutely nothing wrong with streaming quarterbacks if that's something that you need to do. But there are some owners out there that are in deeper leagues or super flex leagues that don't have that luxury. So your chances of mixing up the quarterback position are even greater. But what are we going to get from Dak Prescott and Daniel Jones on Thursday Night Football? The range of outcomes could be pretty big. Dak Prescott's path to top 12 quarterback status every single week really relies on him taking care of the football. If he has difficult games where he's turning it over, that severely limits his ceiling and brings down his floor. And this week against the New York Giants, maybe he's not a top 5 quarterback, but this is the type of matchup where he definitely can make it inside the top 12. Currently, the Dallas defense has allowed the 4th most rushing yards to the quarterback position, and they've allowed 2 rushing touchdowns to quarterbacks so far this season. Do those stats make Daniel Jones a low-risk start? Absolutely not, but it does help us get a little bit of a better floor this week. Even if he's having a tough time through the air, even if he has a turnover or two, his ability to pick up some yards on the ground and potentially a touchdown with his feet this week definitely would help fantasy owners who are in a position where they have to start him. After only 9 fantasy points in week 3 against the Philadelphia Eagles, Derek Carr dropped from QB2 to QB9, and things are not going to get any easier this week going up against the Atlanta Falcons. Atlanta is currently allowing the 11th fewest passing yards to quarterbacks, but they are allowing the most rushing yards to quarterbacks, which is making the fantasy points seem like it's a more favorable matchup, but that's probably not something Derek Carr is going to take advantage of. And Atlanta has a legit defense. The 11th fewest passing yards are coming after playing teams like Kansas City and Philadelphia. Atlanta definitely has an opportunity to shut down Derek Carr, and this is a very tough matchup this week. And it's going to be all about finding maybe 1 or 2 big plays to take advantage of the defense. If they can do that, Derek Carr is probably inside the top 12. If he can't find that big play, though, he's probably going to struggle once again. The New Orleans Saints have allowed the 7th most passing yards to quarterbacks, but they've only allowed 1 passing touchdown so far this season. This matchup may present a decent floor for Kirk Cousins, but finding the ceiling could be very difficult. So he's going to be a medium risk for me. The passing yards themselves give him that safe floor and allow him the ability to still be fantasy viable this week. But if he can't find the end zone because New Orleans defense holds up and keeps him out of there, then that's where we have trouble making it inside the top 12 quarterbacks, and he goes from being a safe start to a guy that really didn't give you as many points as you needed. Chicago's currently allowing the 10th fewest passing yards and 2nd fewest fantasy points to the quarterback position. And since Matthew Stafford is missing his top 2 targets this week, his ceiling is not what you would want for any type of fantasy viability. Last week, Stafford threw for 221 yards and only 1 touchdown. The turnovers are really going to depend on the game script. If Los Angeles is playing from behind the entire time and Stafford's trying to force some throws, he definitely starts hurting his floor by turning the ball over. But if for some reason this stays in a neutral game script and we see a performance close to last week, he's going to be a guy that is a quarterback 2 for you this week, even if his ceiling comes nowhere close to QB1 status. The LA Rams are currently tied for the most passing touchdowns allowed, the 2nd most fantasy points allowed, and the 3rd most passing yards allowed to quarterbacks. Caleb Williams looked much better last week, and he has an opportunity to keep that going against a very vulnerable defense here in week 4. This matchup presents a top 12 upside for Caleb Williams. How many times he turns the ball over is really going to depend on whether or not he gets inside the top 12 or he falls just outside of it. Green Bay is currently tied for the 7th most passing yards allowed and the 3rd most passing touchdowns allowed. Let's go ahead and give Sam Darnold his props for looking so good to start the season, and we're going to give him a low risk rating this week. Sam Darnold is currently 11th in passing in the NFL and has the most passing touchdowns. He's off to a terrific start this season. He did leave last week with a knee contusion, and so far, Kevin O'Connell has said he should be just fine in this matchup, which will be very, very good for him. It does appear that Jordan Love is set to return here in week 4, and this is not that bad of a matchup, with the Minnesota Vikings allowing the 4th most passing yards. However, they've only allowed 2 passing touchdowns so far this season, and the biggest thing that they're doing is they're allowing a lot of passing yards, but then they're getting turnovers to stop them from getting into the end zone. And with Jordan Love being back this week, I'm going to leave him at a medium risk if he starts, because any type of re-aggravation could definitely send him back to the bench. And with the way Malik Willis has played, I don't know if Green Bay would be willing to risk leaving Love out there if something were to happen and he were not to feel like he's 100%. So make sure you keep an eye on this as the week progresses, because Green Bay has not come out and said yet that yes, Jordan Love is definitely starting. Now, by the time this video comes out, maybe that has changed. But Jordan Love, I do anticipate him being out there this week, and I do anticipate him having a decent game as long as he plays the entire thing. It is going to be really interesting to see what Arthur Smith has cooked up for Justin Fields this week. Indianapolis's defense has been shredded so far this season. They're currently allowing the 8th most passing yards, and they're tied for 3rd in passing touchdowns allowed. And Justin Fields is coming off a pretty good day through the air last week. He was 25 of 32 for 245 passing yards and a touchdown, which is fantasy viable given the fact that he also can add some yards on the ground with his legs or a rushing touchdown. There is a good chance that Justin Fields finds himself inside the top 12 quarterbacks this week, and this could end up being another easy victory for the Pittsburgh Steelers. And unfortunately, Anthony Richardson, you're my boy. I've got your picture right up there, man. I was a big fan of you coming out of college, and I still am. But this is not the matchup, and that's why you're going to be my Mando must-avoid for the week. If you've been playing Anthony Richardson at the quarterback position, I would encourage you to find somebody else that is not nearly as risky. And if you're looking for a new deodorant the same way that you may be looking for a new quarterback now, then Mando is the way to go. Head on over to shopmando.com and you can use code word headliners for $5 off their starter pack. That's almost 40% off the price. And Mando is what I trust during a long and grueling football season. Their clinically proven formula can eliminate odors for up to 72 hours, which is amazing when I am sitting here recording like crazy. But this Pittsburgh defense is only allowing 8.2 fantasy points per game to the quarterback position right now. Anthony Richardson has been wildly inconsistent the first 3 weeks. He's definitely finding some success down the field, but his work over the middle of the field needs a lot of help. Now, one of the interceptions that he threw last week wasn't entirely his fault. That little jump pass near the goal line, that was deflected, and unfortunately it resulted in an interception. But there's no excuses. He has 6 total in 3 games right now. And that's why over on Underdog, I'm going to go ahead and put him in on my ticket to throw an interception this week. And if you're definitely feeling spicy, if you think he may throw multiple interceptions, you can go 1.5, take the over, and get a 2.28 multiplier with it. But for me, in this matchup, I would rather try and stream somebody this week and then go about going back to Anthony Richardson after he gets through this tough matchup, and hopefully whoever you stream has a little bit more upside. The New York Jets are currently allowing the 3rd fewest fantasy points, tied for 2nd in fewest passing touchdowns allowed, and allowing the 8th fewest passing yards to opposing quarterbacks. With Bo Nix, he lacks a lot of big play upside right now. He's throwing the ball an awful lot, and he was pretty efficient last week. But this matchup is not a good one for him. And not only that, but Bo Nix still has not thrown a touchdown yet through 3 weeks. Now, he could pick up a play on the ground and maybe even get a rushing touchdown if they get inside the red zone and are close enough to make a play with his legs. But Bo Nix hasn't been doing a whole lot through the air in terms of giving you a lot of fantasy upside. And in this matchup, it's probably best to just go ahead and skip over him if you've been trying to play him. Denver's defense right now is allowing the 3rd fewest passing yards to quarterbacks. And Aaron Rodgers didn't look vintage Aaron Rodgers in week 3, but he did look a lot better than he did in week 2. Hopefully he continues to progress and continues to play better and feel more comfortable. If that happens, it's going to be great for Garrett Wilson. I've already talked about it in my wide receiver video. I have a little bit of concerns about Garrett Wilson this week, but hopefully if Aaron Rodgers plays well, at least he has a decent floor, even if he doesn't have top 12 upside. The Tampa Bay defense has yet to allow a passing touchdown to a quarterback. However, they have allowed over 140 rushing yards to quarterbacks, second most in the NFL. I mean, this week, definitely Jalen Hurts could run for 140 yards by himself. Maybe that's a little bit high, but he's going to be missing his top 2 wide receivers and is probably going to be scrambling out of the pocket a little bit more than what he would like to. Even though he's been wildly inconsistent through the air, it feels like to start the season, and this matchup may be a little bit tougher through the air. His rushing ability alone and chance to score on the ground give him a safe enough floor that he can find himself inside the top 12, and he's a low risk for me. This is a pretty solid matchup for Baker Mayfield and an opportunity for him to get going again. Through the first 2 weeks of the season, he was the quarterback one in fantasy. Took a little bit of a drop last week, but hopefully we'll get back on track against Philadelphia. This Philadelphia secondary is definitely vulnerable, and if Baker Mayfield can just take care of the ball this week, him, Mike Evans, and Chris Godwin should be in for huge fantasy performances. San Francisco's defense is currently allowed the 3rd most passing touchdowns to quarterbacks, but I don't know if Jacoby Brissett is going to take advantage of that. Maybe he finds the end zone once through the air, but if New England comes out planning to throw the ball like they did last week against the Jets, they're going to end up losing again. So if they come out with the proper game plan to run the football and give Jacoby Brissett some high percentage throws, but really rely on just pounding the football and keeping it in their possession, then Jacoby Brissett's not going to have a ton of upside. New England is allowing the 4th most passing yards right now, and Brock Purdy, even with his top 2 options gone last week, technically 3 if you're counting Christian McCaffrey, still had a really solid day with 3 passing touchdowns. Now, he could end up getting George Kittle back this week, and Kittle, Ayuk, and Juwan Jennings are more than enough, especially running the football with Jordan Mason, to allow Brock Purdy to be successful. He definitely could see an opportunity very similar to what he saw last week, and even if we don't see that type of ceiling, his floor should still be pretty well. Las Vegas is currently allowing the 9th most passing yards, and they're tied for 3rd for the most passing touchdowns allowed. And Deshaun Watson had a really good day in week 3. But even with that good day, he still was not able to cross 200 yards passing. Until we can see him get back to elite status for several games in a row, he continues to be a risky option that has an okay floor every single week, but his ceiling just isn't that of many other quarterbacks in the NFL right now. Right now, I'm going to list Gardner Minshew and Aiden O'Connell as high-risk plays this week. Antonio Pierce on Monday had originally said that he would not rule out making a change at the quarterback position after Aiden O'Connell came in for Gardner Minshew at the end of week 3. But then he said no change coming, and Gardner Minshew will start once again. But that doesn't mean that Las Vegas isn't going to find themselves heading into the 4th quarter with a largely inconsistent Gardner Minshew and decide to give Aiden O'Connell another shot to see if he can boost the offense. I think it's pretty fair to say that Patrick Mahomes is going to be a low-risk start regardless of the opponent. The LA Chargers are allowing the 5th fewest fantasy points to the quarterback position, and I'm still going to roll Patrick Mahomes out if I own him. The problem hasn't necessarily been his floor, it's been his ceiling. He just hasn't reached the ceiling that we're used to seeing Patrick Mahomes hit. And I'm going to give a shout out to Jason Moore from the Fantasy Footballers for this tidbit that I saw him post over on Twitter. But Patrick Mahomes has only scored 20 or more fantasy points in 17% of his last 17 games. It actually gives him one of the worst ceilings that you can find on a weekly basis for a quarterback. And in a matchup this tough, he may not find that ceiling once again this week. But you drafted Patrick Mahomes pretty early in your draft. And quite honestly, you probably don't have anyone else sitting on your bench that you're going to rely to toss out there. But this continues to be one of the reasons why we tell people don't spend such an early pick on quarterbacks. The Kansas City defense currently allows the 6th most passing yards to the quarterback position and the 7th most fantasy points. But will Justin Herbert even be available to take advantage of that this weekend? Luckily, x-rays on his ankle have come back negative. But after re-aggravating it last week, we still don't have word on whether or not he'll even play in week 4. Carolina's defense is currently tied for allowing the most passing touchdowns to quarterbacks right now. And with Joe Burrow on tap, it's probably not going to look any better. He threw for over 300 yards and 3 touchdowns last week. He looked fantastic. It's not his fault that his defense sucked it up and couldn't figure out a way to stop Jayden Daniels. But Joe Burrow is going to be a great play this week and an awesome matchup. The Cincinnati defense, after shutting down Patrick Mahomes the week prior, allowed 248 passing yards to Jayden Daniels in week 3. For weeks 1 and 2 combined, they allowed 257 total passing yards. And Andy Dalton's coming off of a 300-yard, 3-touchdown game himself, and he definitely could take advantage of a defense that didn't look anywhere close to being ready last week. If they play like they did against Kansas City, they should be solid, and Andy Dalton definitely doesn't have the upside. But if they play like they did against Washington, it's going to be another big day for the Red Rifle, and he becomes a pretty easy start moving forward. Houston's defense is currently allowing the 12th fewest pass yards, but they are tied for second in touchdowns allowed to quarterbacks. And Trevor Lawrence supporters are quickly dwindling. The #1 overall pick a few years ago probably isn't finding his way to the bench anytime soon like Bryce Young did, but his coach absolutely could be on the hot seat. This Jacksonville team needs to start doing something soon, but in this matchup, it may not be the time it happens. After getting completely blown up by the Buffalo Bills, Jacksonville is reeling, and their defense now allows the 4th most passing yards and the 3rd most fantasy points to quarterbacks. This is the perfect matchup for CJ Stroud to get back on track. Currently, he's outside the top 12 quarterbacks, but that could absolutely change with a big game this weekend. This offseason, I did a video called 5 Steps to Winning Your Fantasy Championship, and step number 4 was if you wanted the upside of Jalen Hurts, Josh Allen, or Lamar Jackson, to skip all 3 of them and draft the diet version of Jayden Daniels much later in your draft. Well, guess what? Diet version is actually a pretty significant step down from what Jayden Daniels is actually doing, because he's currently the quarterback 2 in fantasy now. His breakout game against Cincinnati just wasn't great, it was historic. And now he gets the Arizona Cardinals, allowing the 9th most fantasy points to the quarterback position. Jayden Daniels could be in for another solid day. Washington's defense now allows the most fantasy points, most passing touchdowns, and 3rd most passing yards to the quarterback position. So if you've got offenses playing against Washington, you fire them up, including Kyler Murray, whose line over on Underdog right now of 229.5 passing yards feels dramatically low. So I'm heading on over there and I'm placing a ticket and going higher than that current line. And yeah, maybe there's a possibility where Arizona's playing in some positive game script and he just doesn't end up reaching those yards because they aren't throwing the ball as much. But hopefully with Jayden Daniels playing well on the other side, it keeps things close and Arizona's got to pass the entire time, just like Joe Burrow had to do this past week. Buffalo has been absolutely insane the last couple of weeks, but the crazy thing is they could keep that stretch going against the Baltimore Ravens, who have allowed over 900 passing yards to opposing quarterbacks, most in the NFL, by 147 yards. Right now, Josh Allen could end up having a huge week, and his passing line over on Underdog of 230.5 yards also doesn't feel high enough. I'm going to absolutely take the over on that, and we're going to toss that into a ticket right now because, I mean, the only thing that's going to keep Buffalo and Josh Allen from hitting that number is blowing out Baltimore so bad that Josh Allen isn't throwing in the second half. But hopefully Baltimore's defense can put up a little bit of resistance, and hopefully Baltimore's offense can keep the score close. I mean, if you had to bank on anyone being the quarterback 1 after this week, it would definitely be Josh Allen. Lamar Jackson's matchup, not nearly as nice, but we definitely know they can chuck the ball a lot better than they used to. And for Lamar Jackson this week, because of his running upside, he definitely has the ability to hit a nice safe floor of top 12 quarterbacks. But he's going to have to find the end zone a couple of times, whether it be through the air or on the ground, if he wants to be a mid-range QB1 this week and what will be a little bit of a tougher matchup. Gotta be honest, I don't think that I'm playing any quarterback in this matchup. Will Levis, who's been sacked 15 times this season, second most in the NFL, is going up against a defense currently allowing the 8th fewest passing yards to quarterbacks. And Will Levis continues to make an awful lot of mistakes. And then Skylar Thompson, he could end up starting this week. He had a little bit of a rib issue that could end up holding him out, and then somebody else could end up starting. But really, for this matchup here, let's just go ahead and avoid the quarterback position altogether. For the final matchup of the week, Seattle and Detroit. And for Geno Smith, he seems to be a low-risk start for me this week. Right now, Detroit is absolutely banged up. They already allow the 10th most passing yards to quarterbacks. Brian Branch is in the concussion protocol. Aleem McNeil may end up missing this week. And Marcus Davenport is done for the rest of the season. There's definitely a great opportunity for Geno Smith to find his floor. And the last couple of times they've played Detroit, he's played pretty well. And Seattle, on the flip side for their defense, is much better. They're currently ranked inside the top 10 of fewest touchdowns, fantasy points, and passing yards allowed to the quarterback position. And now we find out that Frank Ragnow, the all-pro center for Detroit, will likely end up missing this week unless he toughens it up and decides to play with a torn pectoral. But with the bye week coming up, I feel like holding him out is the best thing to do for his long-term value, and that's going to be problems for Jared Goff this week. Even though it is at home and Jared Goff typically plays better at home, there is no shot that I'm giving him the chance this week, given how tough this matchup is, the fact that he's going to be missing his center, and that Detroit realistically should probably be running the football way more often than they're trying to pass it this week. But Headliner Nation, that does it for all the start and sit videos for week 4. Thank you all again for tuning in all week long, and hopefully you've been enjoying the content and utilizing it to be successful in fantasy football. That's going to do it for me until Saturday night, though. Make sure, members, you keep an eye on your feed. I'll be doing a members only video breakdown at some point for a player that's been struggling to start the year, and we'll try to figure out if they can get back on track. But for now, good luck, Headliner Nation. I'll see you all on Saturday. Stay safe, stay healthy, and I'll catch you on the next episode of the Fantasy Headline.